All right, we're live online.
All right. Well, good evening, everyone. My name is Michael Donnelly, and I'm an alcoholic, and it is a pleasure to be here tonight. I want to welcome everyone to the Treasure Map meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous. We normally meet at Faith Lutheran Church Gymnasium, 601 North Cliff Avenue in Sioux Falls, South Dakota. And because of the coronavirus, we are unable to meet in the church. And as most of you know, all of you may know, we always live stream our meetings, and so tonight it's exclusively just live streaming. So we welcome you, and we're glad you're here. And if you're new, we want to send out a special welcome to you. Let's take a moment of silence, and then we'll say the Serenity Prayer together. God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. Welcome to the Treasure Map meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous. This is an open speaker meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous. We are glad you are all here with us, especially the new people. In keeping with our singleness of purpose and our third tradition, which states that the only requirement for AA membership is a desire to stop drinking, we ask all who participate in tonight's meeting confine their discussions to their problems as they relate to alcohol and alcoholism. The AA Preamble, reprinted with permission by Grapevine, incorporated Alcoholics Anonymous is a fellowship of men and women who share their experience, strength, and hope with each other that they may solve their common problem and help others to recover from alcoholism. The only requirement for membership is a desire to stop drinking. There are no dues or fees for AA membership. We are self-supporting through our own contributions. AA is not allied with any sect, denomination, politics, organization, or institution, does not wish to engage in any controversy, neither endorses nor opposes any causes. Our primary purpose is to stay sober and to help other alcoholics achieve sobriety. We want to send a special message to anyone who is from out of town. We also want to, again, make sure that any first-time members or any first-time people at attending the Treasure Map meeting are welcome. And so if you're here tonight for the first time, if you're online with us, we appreciate you here being with us. Please feel free to use our 12-step Facebook page as a way to link into these meetings. We also send out weekly emails for those who would like to join us online. So you can go to treasuremapmeeting.com and register for online meetings, and every week you'll get a link on how to go about joining us every single week. So we have some great speakers, fantastic speakers tonight. In the upcoming weeks, we have some folks who will be telling their story from New York, from North Carolina, from Texas, from Pennsylvania, literally all over the United States. So we appreciate you being with us, and you're welcome to join us. Now please help me welcome Charlie G., who will read How It Works from Chapter 5 of the Big Book, Alcoholics Anonymous. Charlie?
Hey, Mike, thanks. Hey, guys, my name's Charlie G. I'm an alcoholic.
Hi, Charlie.
Hey, Mike. And this is how it works. Rarely have we seen a person who has thoroughly followed our path. Those who do not recover are people who cannot or will not completely give themselves to the simple program. Usually men and women who are constitutionally incapable of being honest with themselves. There are such unfortunates. They are not at fault. They seem to have been born that way. They are naturally incapable of grasping and developing a manner of living which demands rigorous honesty. Their chances are less than average. There are those too who suffer from grave emotional and mental disorders, but many of them do recover if they have the capacity to be honest. Our stories disclose in a general way what we used to be like, what happened, and what we are like now. If you have decided you want what we have and are willing to go to any length to get it, then you are ready to take certain steps. At some of these, we balked. We thought we could find an easier, softer way, but we cannot. With all the earnestness at our command, we beg of you to be fearless and thorough from the very start. Some of us have tried to hold on to our old ideas, and the result was nil, and so we let go absolutely. Remember that we deal with alcohol, cunning, baffling, powerful. Without help, it is too much for us. But there is one who has all power. That one is God. May you find him now. Half measures availed us nothing. We stood at the turning point. We asked his protection and care with complete abandon. Here are the steps we took, which are suggested as a program of recovery. 1, we admitted we are powerless over alcohol, that our lives have become unmanageable. 2, came to believe that a power greater than ourselves could restore us to sanity. 3, made a decision to turn our will and our lives over to the care of God as we understood him. 4, made a searching and fearless moral inventory of ourselves. 5, admitted to God, to ourselves, and to another human being the exact nature of our wrongs. 6, we're entirely ready to have God remove all these defects of character. 7, humbly asked him to remove our shortcomings. 8, made a list of all persons we had harmed and became willing to make amends to them all. 9, made direct amends to such people wherever possible, except when to do so would injure them or others. 10, continue to take personal inventory, and when we were wrong, promptly admitted it. 11, sought through prayer and meditation to improve our conscious contact with God as we understood him, praying only for knowledge of his will for us and the power to carry that out. 12, having had a spiritual awakening as a result of these steps, we tried to carry this message to alcoholics and to practice these principles in all our affairs. Many of us exclaimed, "What an order! I can't go through with it." Do not be discouraged. No one among us has been able to maintain anything like perfect adherence to these principles. We are not saints. The point is that we are willing to grow along spiritual lines. The principles we have set down are guides to progress. We claim spiritual progress rather than spiritual perfection. Our description of the alcoholic, the chapter to the agnostic, and our personal adventures before and after make clear 3 pertinent ideas. A, that we are alcoholics and cannot manage our own lives. B, that probably no human power could ever relieve our alcoholism. And C, that God could and would if he were stopped.
Thank you, Charlie.
Thanks, Mike.
The 7th tradition states, every AA group ought to be fully self-supporting, declining outside contributions. If you'd like to make an online contribution to the Treasure Map meeting, the 7th tradition is available on our website at treasuremapmeeting.com. Many of us give regularly through a PayPal account to make sure that we have consistent flow to our group to support our expenses. The expenses that we do, we certainly thank you for your support on that. The donations to the Treasure Map group support all of our local activities and our group activities. In addition, they help pay our rent, coffee, snacks, literature. In this particular case, the software that's bringing this online meeting to you. Plus, we happily support the local Sioux Falls Intergroup, South Dakota Regional District 5, statewide Area 63, and of course the General Service Office supporting Alcoholics Anonymous around the world in New York. Now please welcome Matthew H. from Niagara Falls, New York, to read the 12 traditions of Alcoholics Anonymous.
Good evening, everybody. I'm Matthew. I'm an alcoholic.
Hi, Matthew.
Well, below. 12 traditions found on page 562 of the 4th edition. 1, our common welfare should come first. Personal recovery depends upon AA unity. 2, for our group purposes, there is but one ultimate authority, a loving God as He may express Himself in our group conscience. Our leaders are but trusted servants, they do not govern. 3, the only requirement for AA membership is a desire to stop drinking. 4, each group should be autonomous except in matters affecting other groups or AA as a whole. 5, each group has but one primary purpose, carry its message to the alcoholic who still suffers. 6, an AA group ought never endorse, finance, or lend the AA name to any related facility or outside enterprise, lest property and prestige divert us from our primary purpose. 7, each AA group ought to be fully self-supporting, declining outside contributions. 8, Alcoholics Anonymous should remain forever non-professional, but our service centers may employ special workers. 9, AA, as such, ought never be organized, but we may create boards or committees directly responsible to those they serve. 10, Alcoholics Anonymous has no opinion on outside issues. Hence, the AA name ought never be drawn into public controversy. 11, our public relations policy is based on attraction rather than promotion. We need always maintain personal anonymity at the level of press, radio, and films. And 12, anonymity is the spiritual foundation of all our traditions, ever reminding us to place principles before personalities.
Thank you, Matthew. I appreciate that.
Thank you.
Our speakers tonight, our 15-minute speaker will be Tom C. from Aberdeen, South Dakota. And our 45-minute speaker will be Joan Z. from Sioux Falls. With that being said, I'm going to pass it over to Tom C. from Aberdeen, South Dakota. Tom?
Hi, everyone. My name's Tom. I'm an alcoholic.
Hi, Tom.
First of all, thanks to Mike and to the Treasure Map group for inviting me to speak here tonight. It really is an honor and a pleasure. So thanks for that, guys. And hello to everybody listening. I've been fortunate enough to have been sober since May 25th of 2002. And so I came into Alcoholics Anonymous when I always say I was just a baby. I was 21 years old. One of the things that I've learned over the last 17 years in the program is that I really only have or know two ways to live my life. And the first one is to try to do what the people in the program have taught me to do, to try to incorporate some semblance of a relationship with a higher power into my life, to try to go through the steps and work through the steps as best I can on a daily basis. The other way that I know how to live, I guess, is really just my way. And really what I mean by that is just a way of life in which I'm trying to figure out how can I make Tom feel good, whatever good means for me in that particular moment, as quickly as I possibly can. And one thing that's always been true in my life, and it's been true before I came into this program and since I came into this program, is that I know how to make a huge mess of my life whenever I try to live things or do things my way. And as I said, I came in to this program when I was 21 years old. I started drinking when I was about 15. So I didn't really drink for that long. But in that time, I was arrested probably a half a dozen times. I was kicked out of school. I was in car accidents. I lied, I cheated, I stole, all the things that my parents taught me from a young age not to do. I ended up doing them. And it wasn't something that I gave a lot of thought to, because I really, the best way that I've ever heard anybody describe how I felt before I found alcohol was this. And I heard a speaker say one time that it was like everybody else in life had been given the instruction manual for how to live, and I didn't have it. And as a result of that, even though I came from a good family and I had good parents and siblings who were outgoing and people liked and who were popular, I just never felt like I fit in. And it didn't really matter what I did. I was always comparing myself to the kids in my own peer group, trying to figure out where I stacked up against them. And I spent so much time sort of wrapped up in that prideful comparison of where I stacked up against these kids that I never really forged any relationships. And I got to a period in time where I was very, very lonely and very, very depressed. And I really didn't have any friends for about the 2 years before I started drinking alcohol. And what happened that I think sort of saved me or got me out of that was, number one was sports. I grew up in a small town, and so I was considered a good athlete. And so I started playing basketball and football with kids that were older than me. And I loved that because instead of having to worry about where I, stacked up in the line, I was just like these guys' little brother. And they would just put their arm around me and they would kid around with me and I would just go where they took me, right? And so I didn't have to worry about that comparison anymore. And the other thing that saved me even more was alcohol. And it was an interesting thing for me because about 8th grade, I had made a decision that I wasn't going to drink alcohol because of some things that had happened in my life. But if you fast forward a few years later, I'm hanging out with these older guys, and they make the decision for me that they want me to drink alcohol with them some night. And so I was presented with this dilemma, right, where I had this promise that I had made to myself, or this, that I wanted to keep, and that was sort of pushed up against this desire that I had to be liked by these guys, right? And so why did I drink the first time when I'd already made this commitment not to drink? The truth is because I was just afraid. I just wanted these guys to like me, right? And what happened was that night I discovered something that fundamentally changed my life forever. And I absolutely mean that. I can even sitting here in my vehicle now doing this meeting, I can think back to that first time that I drank alcohol and it was like magic. And everything that I struggled with before was no longer a struggle. All of the shyness, all of the anxiety, all of the fear that ruled my life was gone. And it was replaced by confidence and outgoingness and all of these things that I wanted. And that night for me went the same way that it probably went for a lot of us. I drank way too much. I blacked out. I threw up everywhere. I ended up staying at a buddy's house. And the next day they took me home and they dropped me off at my folks' house. And I went into my house and I crawled up the steps and I crawled into my bedroom and I went into my bathroom and I threw up. I got into my bed and the room is spinning. My head is just pounding, right? And all I can think is how much I just cannot wait to experience that again. Because I really felt like I had unlocked the mystery of life. And I felt for the first time in my life like I could connect with other people. And that's one of the things that I've come to realize is that I just crave a relationship with other people. And I had no idea how to do that until I found alcohol. And I got to be honest, when I went to school the next Monday, a lot of my feelings were confirmed because all of these kids who didn't ever talk to me before, all of these girls, all of these older guys that didn't pay me any attention, they were putting their arms around me and they were talking about how much fun they had with me and how they couldn't wait to hang out with me again. And I made the decision there at 15 years old that I was going to drink as much as I could, as often as I could, whenever I could. And for me, with the family I had, that didn't mean that I drank every day. Although by the time that I graduated high school, I was certainly drinking as often as I possibly could, and I was coming to school drunk, and I was missing classes to drink. All of those things were happening. But I never really, I said earlier about that I was just one of those kids that got in trouble, never huge trouble until the last time, but I was always one of those kids that was getting arrested at parties for drinking or doing something at a party that got him in trouble. And so I found myself in front of a lot of counselors. I found myself in a lot of outpatient treatment programs and things like that. And I would remember sitting in there and they would say things to me like, you have a problem with alcohol, you can't drink anymore. And in my head, like, I'm just thinking, that is the craziest thing I've ever heard. I didn't know how to verbalize it at the time. But what I knew at the time was that when I was sober, I was absolutely miserable, right? But when I was drinking, I felt alive. I felt absolutely alive and I felt absolutely connected with society. And so when somebody would tell me that I couldn't drink anymore, it was just unfathomable to me, you know, and now years later, I can remember hearing guys like Sandy B talk about not having a drinking problem, but having a drinking solution. And like I said, I didn't know those phrases back then, so I couldn't say it that way, but that's how I felt inside. When I was sober, I felt restless, irritable, and discontented. And I missed more classes in college. I skipped more classes in college because I was sober and afraid to go to class than I ever did because I was drunk or I was hungover. I just had no idea how to function in the world unless I was drinking. And so what happened is I said earlier that I made a commitment not to drink alcohol at one point, and then I broke that. And I had a lot of other commitments. Like when I started drinking, I said, okay, but I'm not going to use drugs. And soon enough, I was using drugs. And by the time that I quit drinking, if somebody put it in front of me, I had tried it, right? And this is a kid who didn't even want to drink, much less touch drugs. But I just had such fear that anytime somebody gave something to me or offered to me something, that they weren't going to like me. So I said yes, right? Whatever would make me feel better, whatever would make me feel accepted was what I was going to do. And I didn't really understand I didn't understand that the negative consequences that came along with alcohol were affecting my life. You know, I said earlier that I just wanted to connect with people, and I had no comprehension of the fact that the thing that I thought was helping me connect with everyone was in fact driving them away. It never occurred to me because the effect that I got from alcohol was so powerful that I couldn't see those things. And what happened was the last time that I drank alcohol, I got pulled over and I got arrested for my third DUI. And I knew what a third DUI was because my dad was a lawyer. And so I was scared. Like I was absolutely frightened. And this cop took me to jail. And the next day I'm sitting in this jail cell and all I can think about the whole day long is what is going on with my life? Like, why do these things keep happening to me? And it was the first time in my life that it was the first time in my life that I ever realized like I was the common denominator. And so I got out of this jail cell and I got introduced through a friend of mine, a good friend of mine named Ernie, introduced me to a guy named Keith C. And Keith C had been sober for 12 years. And I'd been to AA before, but that day I met with Keith C. And it was the first time that anybody from Alcoholics Anonymous ever sat down with me and shared their experience, strength, and hope. And Keith talked me into going to treatment. And so I did that. And one of the things that I took away from treatment, the two things that I took away from treatment, the first one was really good, and that is that I was an alcoholic, right? I knew that I couldn't safely drink alcohol. The second thing that I took away from treatment, and it is not something that they taught me in treatment, and it's not something I would recommend, but my second takeaway was just stop drinking and everything will be fine. And so that's what I did. I left treatment, and I was going to meetings every day at Southside down in Sioux Falls. And I was getting my card signed because I wanted to get back to court and I wanted to avoid prison and everything like that. And I was absolutely miserable. Like I was as close to suicide as I've ever been in my life in that moment. And I went to a meeting one night and I told them, I said, if somebody doesn't do something for me, I'm going to go home and I'm going to kill myself because I don't want to live this way. And I left that meeting with my first sponsor. He was a guy named Tim. And one of the things that Tim said to me was, Tom, what you've experienced for the last 6 months or so is the second half of step one. And unmanageability that is your life, right? And he told me that I had to find some new way to live. And he started talking to me about the steps. And he got me to do a fourth step. And he got me to do a fifth step. And, you know, he got me to do all of these things that I really didn't understand or that I didn't really think would work. But I did them because Tim told me to do them. And Tim seemed to be living a life that I wanted, right? And gradually, as I started to do these things and as I've been in the program longer, different things in my life have started to come true. And like I said earlier, I've not done this perfectly over 17 years. I've had a lot of different experiences in my sobriety that did not go very well, right? But I've always come back to the program. I've always come back to the steps. I've always come back to my relationship with my higher power. And what I find is the more that I can stay connected to this program, and I sponsor guys, and I have a sponsor, and the guys that I sponsor, we meet in person, we talk on the phone once a week. My sponsor and I talk on the phone once a week, go to meetings, and I look for opportunities to serve other people. You know, my sponsor says all the time that the solution to my problems are prayer and service, and I never would have thought those were the solutions to my problems, but here I am trying to live my life moment to moment with my higher power. And I just can't believe all of the things that I used to get from alcohol, all of the positive things that I used to get from alcohol, I now have them and more. And I don't have to deal with the negative consequences if I can just continue to try to live the way that you people tell me to live. My life is amazing. It's absolutely incredible the things that have happened to me. And again, I just want to say thanks to the group for asking me to share. And thanks to all of you for listening. That's all I have. Thanks.
Hey Tom, great job. This is Scott. Mike got bounced out of the meeting, it looks like. So we really appreciate you sharing tonight. We're going to take a quick 5-minute break. Right now it's 7:25, so we'll come back at 7:30, and Joan is going to share her story at 7:30. Thank you.
Tom Cogley
is now exiting.
Michael Donnelly.
Is now exiting.
but we just want to make sure we give them some voice or some noise to hear that they're in, you know.
Yeah, so the meeting is unmuted now.
Good, okay. Excellent. Yeah. So that's good. Yeah, I checked it a few times myself throughout the meeting, and it is working, so we should be in good shape. How we doing, Joan?
Good, except I just took a drink of water. Hang on. I'm like, oh no, I've got the car on the cough.
Right. So it is 7:30, and we are going to start it up again. It is my great pleasure to introduce a young lady who has dedicated her life to serving our community, serving our recovery community. She has allowed me the honor and the blessing many, many times in my life to try to carry the message to others. She's facilitated that through her work, and it's something that I deeply appreciate. And with all respect and honor to her, I turn the meeting over to Joan. Joan, we look forward to hearing you. Thanks for being with us tonight at the Treasure Map, and the floor is yours.
Thanks, Michael. Hi, I'm Joan, and I am an alcoholic. And
Hi, Joan.
hi, guys. I want to say hi to everybody out there who is listening. I don't know why I'm so nervous. I'm sitting in my bedroom talking into my phone on speaker, and you guys are all listening out there, and I don't even have to see you, so it's not like it's that big a deal. But I'm still kind of nervous, so forgive me. I think it's everything that's going on. All the anxiety in the world recently, and all the new changes and more changes, and every day there's new changes coming up with work and just how we run our meetings. I never personally even participated in an online meeting before tonight, so we've got that going. So far, I hope I'm not failing that, but I never thought we would ever get to the point where we would replace at any point face-to-face meetings where we sit around the table, but here we are in times where we still need to be supported and loved with our community, and this is the way we can get it done. So thank you, Treasure Map, for all you're doing. We will be listening to many of these podcasts over the next few weeks, I'm sure, at Telegraph. So like I said, my name is Joan, and I am an alcoholic. I have been in recovery since December 19th of 2007. I earned my chair. My life prior to getting clean and sober was, I would say, I always thought it was pretty boring and kind of bland. And when I hear other speakers, they have usually some really great stories. I think, well, that is not me. But I can never doubt for 1 second that I earned my chair to get here. So I grew up in a very large Catholic family. And by very large, I mean very large by today's standards, not probably by old school Catholics. But there were 7 kids in our family, and we ranged anywhere from ages 16 to 0. I grew up in Sioux Falls. That's, so this has been my hometown ever since I was a very little kid, except for a few years when we lived in Rapid City when I was in middle school. My family life was probably no different than anybody else's family life, at least looking back on it. Like I said, we grew up very Catholic, and we were always the large family, the second row pew at St. Lambert's. And so it's like, when I think back about how I grew up, my parents were, by all accounts, pretty normal as far as normal goes. I always, I think with like a lot of us, always felt like I was different. Probably I'm the 3rd child down from the top tier. And so I'm the middle kid, and I always kind of felt left out, and, I didn't really feel a whole lot of anything other than just different from the rest of my family. And I'm not sure exactly what we're supposed to feel when we're growing up, but that is how I felt. And so I always think of like, I was probably born and somewhat created to be a person who used alcohol as a solution to their life. Many things happened over my lifetime, before I got sober that, just reinforced that alcohol was a really good solution for me. And it worked. Our parents moved us from Sioux Falls to across the state to Rock City when I was entering into 6th grade. And we always kind of lived like a block away from whatever church we were going to go to. And we walked to school and all of that. And I remember moving there and feeling like I was completely out of place, which is not undifferent than anybody going into middle school. But it was pretty heavy for me that we left. The only friends that I knew growing up moved over there, had no friends. And I went to a Catholic school there where it was very small. And so I was like one of maybe 14 kids in that class. And I had a hard time that first part of 6th grade making friends. I had always, I'm sure I felt at times I felt less than them. They probably thought I was acting better than them, but that's kind of the part of the course with me is, I'm either one or the other, it seemed like when I was growing up. But the first time I actually ever drank alcohol, outside of a mat, would have been in, right about that time when I was, probably 11, 12 years old. I finally made some friends. I'd been invited over to a sleepover, and we had taken a bottle of wine out of someone's parents' house, and we went to the park, and there was like 6 of us there, and we were passing this bottle of wine around, and, we were all acting like we were, really cool. And also, though, that we were probably drunk, but more so that I remember is that was also the time that I started smoking. And so, while alcohol, at least through my teenage years, kind of came and went, smoking was with me for a long time after that. I kind of felt like alcohol wasn't, I didn't really, my dad was.
Is now exiting.
My dad is an alcoholic, and so I kind of grew up in that, and a lot of people's families were, so it wasn't like this is an abnormal thing. I didn't know anybody who was in recovery. I didn't know anybody who went to AA growing up, and none of that. But I did have the genetic for it, along with other stuff. When I was going to become a freshman, we moved back from Rapid, back to Sioux Falls. My parents at that time there were 6 children. My dad had lost his job, and so he was trying to support all these kids with, like selling insurance, which was not really his gig. But and we had gone from a pretty probably regular middle class family to a very, very poor, food stamps, all of the things, family in a very short time. And looking back, I always felt like I was very resentful about that. Like, how could they pull us out of there, and how dare they, and all of that. And it's like thinking back, like, wow, like how scared my parents must have been that they had to feed their family and no real means to do so. I started at O'Gorman, the Catholic high school here in town, that was my freshman year in '88. Again, no friends. It was like a whole nother world moving into there. I didn't drink really through my high school years, but I did know that I struggled a lot with making friends. I struggled a lot with my parents. I struggled just a lot with everything. And when I became freshman, sophomore year, I didn't do very well in school. I had a terrible issue with math. And so I would just stop going. I would stop going to school. And my junior year of high school, and again, I'm still not really drinking. I'm just really lost. And I got to transfer from O'Gorman to Lincoln High School. So I was like the first kid in my family to go to a non-parochial school, and which was really cool, except when you go from a school where people can keep track of you and to a school where you're like, nobody knows who you are. You can slip through the cracks pretty easily. And so I would walk in to Lincoln High School, and I would go to the payphone, and I would call my boyfriend, and he would come and get me, and I would walk back out of Lincoln High School. And that went on for probably quite a few months before the school figured out that I was enrolled there, and couldn't figure out where I was, and they called my family. And I came home from work at my very awesome job at Taco John's, and my parents had told me, you know, they were super upset with me, and they were like, we know you're not going to school, and if you're not going to go to school, then you're not going to live here. And I remember saying to them, this is the greatest idea. Like, why didn't anybody do this sooner? And I packed a backpack and I left, and I was 16 years old. I didn't really have a plan, didn't really have a clue, nothing. I just knew that, like, I had wanted to get out for so long. From what, I'm not really even sure, but just out. And so I ended up crashing on a cot behind somebody's couch, who, you know, they were probably in their 20s. I'd worked with them or whatever, and they let me stay there, and they were super kind. And there was like fighting chickens in the basement of the neighbor's house or the duplex there, and it was just a really bizarre thing. And I grew up pretty sheltered, so like I never knew anybody who was doing drugs. People drank, but they didn't, like, people that I knew didn't drink excessively. I didn't really have access to a lot of that stuff. And so when I moved into these people's houses, it was like a whole new world. They drank, but it seemed more casual than like excessively. That was the first time, and probably the only time that I really did any drugs. And I had done like 3 White Cross or something, and I remember my heart was going to pump out of my chest. And we had been drinking. I think that I can't remember. It was probably wine coolers or something, really. And I didn't really ever. I always felt like when I would drink that I was losing control. And so, like the gentleman before me was saying, like, I remember making that statement, like, I don't want to drink because I don't like this feeling of losing control. But it also gave me an out of, but I'm so scared that I don't know what else to do. And I want to be accepted. And I want all these things that alcohol seemed to provide for those around me. So if I do that as well, then maybe I too can have that. I got married the first time to that boy who used to pick me up in high school, and I was 18. So when all of my, the student body was graduating from high school, I was walking down the aisle. That lasted all of about 9 months before we divorced, and I was 19 years old and working at a local greenhouse. And I thought I had it pretty together. I made like $4 an hour, and I had a little apartment, and didn't drink. I got together with a gentleman who was a very active alcoholic at the time, in and out of treatment. Really, it kind of, I still didn't drink it. I didn't have a whole lot of access to it, although I did have people around me who could purchase it. Kind of watching it really made me nervous. It wasn't until I was 21 when it became legal. And the day I turned 21, one of my friends turned to me at work, and she says, well, we should go out tonight. And I'm like, oh, okay, or whatever. And I remember walking into the bar, and that was the moment that I had felt like, oh my God, I've arrived. These are my people. Like, everybody was happy. They all seemed happy to see you. People were talking to each other, and it just kind of blended in. And alcohol obviously helped all that. And from that moment until, a couple of years later, I spent like probably every weekend in the bar. I had met my then next husband in that bar. We ran around together with everybody, and all of us drank. It was, it was very common. It was, I was the best drunk driver. I never ever was picked up. But we would go out every weekend, and, we would go from bar to bar to bar, and, you'd get home after closing time and pass out or whatever. And it was fun. I mean, it seemed like a good time. Fast forward, until I was like 23, I found out I was pregnant with my oldest daughter. And I remember when I was pregnant thinking to myself, and especially after she was born, it was like, okay, I started writing all these lines in the sand, like, okay, I'm still going to go out with my friends, because alcohol is an important part of this, but I'm never going to drink at home. and I'm never going to drink around her. You know, I'm not going to do what happened in my family. I'm going to, you know, it's going to be different. You know, it's going to be different for her than it was for me. After my daughter was like probably 18 months old, we moved from Sioux Falls, my husband and I and her, and we moved to a farm out by Brandon, out by Rural Valley Springs, and in a very kind of isolated area. And so to get into, you know, I still would come in and I would still, well, with my friends and everything. But at this point now I'm staying home, and so I'm a stay-at-home mom and trying to navigate the waters of being a first-time mom. My husband was gone a lot. He did a lot of different outside activities besides work. So I was home by myself a lot with this little girl. And eventually I started inviting like people over to my house. So then instead of going out, you know, to the bar, which I still did, it seemed like a more legitimate thing to have people over to drink, you know, at home. So I'm already starting to kind of erase some of those lines a little bit. I do remember thinking, well, I'll never drink, you know, I'm not going to drink before I eat supper. So it was, you know, still to me manageable, the drinking, although every time I drank, I was never ever going to have one or two. I never told myself that. I was always going to get drunk. That was the whole point. If I wasn't going to get drunk or wasn't going to be able to get drunk, then I wasn't going to drink. But I still had enough control over my drinking that I could either drink or not drink, which would cease to happen for me a few years later. When my oldest was 4, I had my second daughter, and at this point, my drinking had picked up speed. I should back up a little bit. About a year before my second daughter was born, my mom had was diagnosed with cancer, and our matriarch of her family, basically, and she passed away. The night that she passed away, she was in hospice at Avera. I couldn't deal with it, and she had woke up earlier that day, and she was telling us how much she loved us and all of that. And before that, she'd been comatose for a few days, and I couldn't deal with it. And I left. My whole family stayed up there, and I'm like, I gotta go home. And what I actually had done is left there. I'd gone to the bar and I got drunk, and I went home and passed out. And at 11 o'clock that night, my brother had called me and told us that she had passed away, and I missed that. I missed that opportunity to say goodbye to her when she moved on. And I lived with that for a long time. A short time after that, my brother had lost a little boy to SIDS, and so we have this grief, kind of like this feeling of I've lost my way when you lose one of your parents. Even though, you know, we'd had all this strife growing up, we had become closer after I'd had my daughter, and I was able to kind of realize some things, you know, as a parent that you're trying to do. So there was a lot of drinking to forget at that point. I had moved on from, you know, not drinking until 5. At some point I figured out that if you drink in the morning, you don't have a hangover. And so that became a pattern. As I would get up in the morning, I had 2 little girls at home. I'd get one off to school, and I would start drinking after everybody left. This was never anything, of course, that, you know, I planned. I never really had any plans about it, but it just became what it was. And so I was at that point probably drinking every day, most of the day. I had moved on from wine, moved into vodka, easier to hide. You know, I didn't have all the bottles to deal with. And nobody really in my family had known that this had taken place. I had called my sister at one point and said, hey, you know, I'm so sad, all this stuff is going on. And she said over the phone, you know, maybe you should look into going into some treatment or some counseling or something. And I must have had just enough liquor in me to have the courage. And I, after I hung up that phone, I called an outpatient program, and I went in, made an appointment, and went in and did my assessment. And they're like, hey, guess what? You passed. And I was like, man, I didn't even tell you the truth. You know, like I only told you a fraction of how much I'm drinking. And I'm already considered someone who needs, a program. I drank through that program because I drank all the time. I had to make the decision to, I was going to get pregnant. I'd always been able to stop drinking when I was pregnant. And I got pregnant with my third daughter. And, the first trimester of me being pregnant with her, I thought, or maybe I don't know, but I was not really capable of stopping drinking at that point. So I'm pregnant with this child. I know I'm pregnant with this child, and I'm still getting drunk, even though I don't want to. And so by the end of that trimester, I had been able to white knuckle, stop drinking. And so for the rest of that pregnancy, I had this terror that I was going to have this baby and she was going to come out and she was going to have fetal alcohol syndrome or something. When she was born healthy, beautiful. And a huge relief, of course, because, you don't tell people that you're drinking heavily, and that you can't stop. All of this should have been enough, you would think, because I carried a lot of shame about that. It wasn't until that was like the thing I wrote down in my 4-step I didn't write down my 4-step that I was going to never tell anybody that I started my 5th-step west. Because I knew if I didn't let that go, I was never, ever going to stop drinking. The day that I brought her home from the hospital. My husband took my 2 older daughters and they went to a football game, and I proceeded to pour a drink. And from that drink until, 18 months later, when I walked into my first inpatient program, I was not sober. There was no sobriety, no sober breath, nothing. I was drunk the whole time. My husband was starting to catch on to how much I was drinking. My daughter would come home from the bus. My oldest daughter would come home from the bus, and she's pouring out drinks. She's pouring out bottles. I'm trying to sober up by the time she gets home. All of these things are not working, but I'm still moving forward. I'm so caught up in the addiction part of it. And I'm extremely mad at the God that I had, because I would stand in the shower drinking and cry and pray and ask for, when is this going to stop? And it wouldn't stop. And so I kind of just stopped praying about it at all. It was like all these foxhole prayers and everything. And my first inpatient program was, it was decided in a couple days you're going to go, and I agreed, and I went, and I do really well in treatment. I like to please people, so I'll tell you what you want to hear. And they gave me a good to fair prognosis of staying sober, and yay me. And I left the facility. I went to the airport. Actually, I took a cab downtown first before I checked in the airport, and I started drinking. And this was in 45 minutes after doing my first inpatient program. So it's cunning, baffling, and powerful. And I don't know what part of you can't pick up the first drink that I missed in that treatment, but I did. Or I didn't have step 1 down remotely, even though they had talked about it, and I agreed to it. And I could say the words that, hi, I'm Joan, I'm an alcoholic, but I don't know that I actually believed that. I got home, and from the time I got home, it was 6 months of basically absolute hell. They had told me in that treatment facility to go to meetings. I found you guys. I really didn't want what you had. I really thought you guys were crazy. And I drank in those meetings. Like, I would pour a drink in a, bottle of whatever, and I would bring it in the meeting, and I would go every day. And I would think, when am I going to stop? When am I going to get what all you guys had? But wasn't really willing to do anything that you were doing. And you kept telling me to come back, and I kept coming back. And so within that 6 months, I kept getting caught. And my husband told me, this is it. This is the last time. If I catch you drinking again, you've got to go, because we're not going to watch you die. And I didn't realize that that's what was going on, that they were watching me die. I had already felt dead. I couldn't seem to get the job done. I kept waking up even though I didn't want to. But I didn't have any other way to do life. This was the only way I knew. When my last day of drinking, or my last drinks before, my husband had called me, I had left the home, and he called me and said, "What are you going to do?" And I said, I don't have any idea. And that was like that moment of clarity. Like, I have no idea what I'm going to do. Moment of clarity and a moment of honesty. And he said, "I'm coming over." And he came over and he brought the sheriff with him. And they're like, "Hey, you got to go to detox." And, you know, I'm kind of a princess. And I was like, okay, you know, they're going to maybe give me some Valium. And they took me to county detox. And I got in there and they were handing me this, you know, toothbrush. And she's like, "No, give her a real toothbrush because she's going to be here for a while." And I lost my mind. And I was only in there for a couple days and didn't know the backstory of them trying to put in, my family trying to put an IVC, was going to put an IVC on me. And that was on, you know, when I walked in those doors, that was December 19th of 2007. And I had not drank that day. I was probably, I drank the night before and I woke up the next morning, you know, to that phone call. But that was like those divine moments that you don't realize are happening. Like your God is stepping in for you. All those prayers in the shower and all those prayers that your family had done for you was getting you to the other side. It felt horrible. I mean, I was like thoroughly ashamed and all of these things, but this was my God working for me. And the lady who was the counselor at detox said, you know, she was telling me about her last experience in drinking. She'd been clean and sober for like 9 months, and her last drunk was scope. And I sat across the table from her and thought to myself, well, I'm not that bad. And I'm the detox patient. You know, she's the person trying to help me. And she said, "Are you willing to go back into treatment?" And up until that point, I had not been willing. And I said, "Yes, I'm willing." And she called Eppley's, and I happen to know people who worked there because of the meetings. And I called, and they answered the phone, and I begged them to let me come, and they agreed, and they came and got me, and I went my last, God willing, my last inpatient program. And while I was in that treatment, it was like an AA boot camp, and so there was no medical to it. It was all AA all the time. I got to go to lots of outside meetings. I was given a mentor who eventually would become my sponsor. And the door, I needed that separation from alcohol so I could get a clear head, so I could kind of at least get my feet in the water of recovery. And after I left that program, I went into a sober living home, which was, you know, I mean, they told me that I should do that. And so I was willing to follow the directions of other people for the first time. And I went to a